Bienvenidos, jugué todas las misiones de entrenamiento que están actualmente en el lanzamiento de este módulo y las subtitulé. Pero les voy a pedir un favor, voy a colocar marcas de tiempo en cada capítulo. Pero ustedes, en la caja de comentarios, colocarán la marca de tiempo específica que más les sirva como recordatorio. Por ejemplo, digamos que no recuerdan cómo se cambiaba la radio AM a FM, así que van a llegar a esa parte del video y en la caja de comentarios colocan minuto X con segundo Y, cómo cambiar radio AM a FM. De esta manera gano yo, sí, porque vuelven a visitar el video, pero también ustedes porque tendrán una referencia rápida que les sirve no solo al que la puso, sino que también va a ayudar a todo el resto de la comunidad que revise los comentarios. Habiendo dicho eso, disfruten el video.
On the left side, mic switch to on. Anti-collision lights to on. Position lights to 3. Set the conformal tank switch to the stop transfer position. Next, set both inlet ramp switches to auto. Okay, moving on. Turn on all 3 cast switches, yaw, roll, and pitch. Check that the anti-skid is in the norm, hook is up, landing gear handle is down, master arm is off, and jettison buttons are not pushed in. Set the oxygen switch to on. Your Wizzo had Mongolian barbecue last night and you don't want to be smelling that. Turn the left and right generator switches to on. Make sure that the emergency generator switch is in the auto position. Set the left and right engine control switches to on. JFS starter switch to on. Lift the covers on the left and right engine master switch. Set both switches to on. Place the covers back down. Set the ECS switch to auto. Without it, your avionics won't get any cooling and may shut down or even get damaged. Make sure that the bleed valves are set to both. Alright, now on to the actual engine start. Pull and release the JFS handle. The starter ready light has to come up within 10 seconds. Make sure to left click on the handle as right clicking will turn it. We're about to go to the warning system checks. I will continue with my instructions either after all the audible warnings are played, which will take some time, or after they are silenced with the BW tone silence switch. Press it now so that you are familiar with its location. Check the fire warning system by placing the fire extinguisher switch in the test position.
Warning,
AMAD fire lights
fire.
should come on and
Warning,
an audible warning should be
AMAD
heard.
fire.
Let's move to the right engine start. Raise and release the finger lift on the right throttle. Wait for the engine monitor to come online, which will happen at around 15% RPM. Observe the engine indications and wait for it to stabilize at around 26%. Check the fire warning system again by placing the fire extinguisher switch in the test position. This time,
Warning,
AMAD and both engine
fire.
fire lights
Warning,
should come on.
AMAD. Warning, engine fire left. Warning, engine fire left. Warning, engine fire right. Warning.
Now move the right throttle to the idle position to start pumping fuel to the engine. It takes around 10 seconds for the RPM to start raising further. At between 55 to 60%, the JFS will disengage, the main generator will come online, and the right ramp will drop down. You should once again check the fire warning system by pressing the fire extinguisher switch down. All warning lights should now be on, including the right
Warning,
and left burn
AMAD
through.
fire. Warning, warning, and warning.
Close the canopy by pushing the canopy handle to the down position. Now lock it by pushing the handle fully forward. Now it's time to start the left engine. Raise and release the finger lift on the left throttle. Again, watch the engine indications. When RPM reaches 26%, push the left throttle to idle. At around 60% RPM, the left ramp should drop down. Turn on the UFC by rotating the brightness knob clockwise. Turn on both radios by pushing the channel selector knobs. Turn on both MPDs and the MPCD. Turn on the HUD by cranking the brightness knob clockwise to the desired intensity. Check the warning and caution lights by pressing and holding the lights test switch. Let's move to the sensors panel now. Set the radar altimeter to on. Set the terrain following radar to standby. Set the radar knob to on. Turn on the nav FLIR switch. Set the INS alignment knob to GC align. A GC no taxi legend is now displayed on the HUD. The alignment process should take around 4 minutes. Let's set up the remaining lights. Vertical tail floodlight to on and formation lights to 3. This is also a good moment to set up your screens and PAX programs, but both things will be covered by a separate training lesson. Okay, we're almost ready. Set the conformal tank switch back to transfer. Set the fuel knob to conformal tank's position. Check the total fuel quantity and set the bingo as desired, say to 3,000 pounds with the bingo fuel knob. Uncage the standby attitude indicator. Normally you would also set the altimeter to the airfield elevation using the knob. Remember that standard setting is 2992, and you should set that whenever you pass the transition altitude in a specific FAA or ICAO region that you're operating in. Alright, check that the GC OK is displayed on the HUD, and if it is, turn the INS knob to nav. And that's it. In the next lesson, we'll cover taxi and takeoff procedures. I also promise that from now on, these lessons will be much shorter and more to the point, keeping them at 10 minutes maximum. Welcome back. Today, you will practice taxiing, taking off, and climbing in the F-15E. I've loaded the mission with the aircraft hot on the parking spot and ready for taxi. Okay, first release the parking brake. Slightly advance the throttle, and as the aircraft starts to roll, test the toe brakes. Now, advance the throttle again, and as the aircraft starts rolling, steer left and right to check the nose wheel steering. Then stop again. Check all the warning and caution lights. Normally you would contact the tower and request taxi clearance, so let's assume I did a bid. We'll taxi directly to left. Gently push the throttles, taxi out, and turn to left. You can increase your turn rate by pressing and holding the nose wheel steering button on the stick. Try it now if you want. Pay close attention to taxi speed. Remember that if the aircraft is light, it will have a tendency to accelerate even with very little power. If it's heavy, you should perform all turns at minimum practicable speed and maximum practicable radius. Okay, stop here. Now re-engage the parking brake. Confirm the inlet ramp switches are in auto. Check that the ejection control safety lever is armed. Check for free and correct flight control movements. Make sure that the flap switch is set to down. Now push the takeoff trim button and hold it until the light turns on and an audible warning is heard.
Yaw rate. Yaw rate.
Check that the canopy is closed and locked. Now turn on the radar by placing the knob in the on position. Set the pitot and engine heat switches as required. If you don't expect icing conditions, you can leave the engine heat off. Check that the INS knob is set to nav. Landing light on. With that, you're ready to enter the active runway. Again, normally you would request clearance from the tower before doing so. Release the parking brake. Enter the runway and try and line up down the center line. Apply the toe brakes and hold them. And this is why you should never skip leg day at the gym. Advance the throttles to 82% and check the instrument and warning caution lights. Also, verify the engine monitor display and check that the FTIT and oil pressure rise above idle. Fuel flow is above 4,000 pounds per hour and nozzle position is around 20% open. Satisfied, release the brakes and advance throttles to mill or max power, depending on the gross weight of the aircraft. As you reach rotation speed, right about now, gently pull the stick until the W symbol on the HUD intercepts the 10-degree line on the pitch ladder. If the nose wants to go up, trim it down until you're happy. Raise your gear. And flaps. Climb out keeping 350 knots indicated airspeed until you reach 0.90 Mach in mil power. Then keep 0.90 Mach until you reach the cruise altitude. Alright, well done. This concludes the taxi and takeoff part of the training.
Y'all rate. Y'all rate.
Welcome back. Please wait for everything to load properly. I have paused the simulation so that you can fully focus on the task at hand. Today we will learn how to take command of displays in the front cockpit. Give me a second to set everything up properly for you. There, that's better. The process itself is very simple. You will be using the castle switch on your stick. Yes, the very stick you can't see on the screen to do that. You can take command of the HUD, left MPD, right MPD, and the bottom MPCD. Let's start with the displays. To take control of the MPD or MPCD, press and hold the castle switch on your stick in the direction of the display you want to use until 4 short vertical lines show at the bottom of the given screen. Feel free to practice as I talk about the details. So as an example, to take control of the air-to-air radar on the left MPD, hold the castle switch left until the command marks appear. If you want to control the lantern pod, currently displayed on the MPCD, hold the castle switch aft. Chances are that you already messed something up, and now you can see the Tactical Electronic Warfare System, or TOOS in short, on the right MPD and the ADI on the MPCD. That's because you short press the castle switch right and or aft, respectively. Use the push button 11 to bring up the menu, and then select AG radar again on the right MPD and TGP on ADI. Not all displays can be commanded. Those that provide information only, like the engine page or HSI, won't cooperate, and neither will the HUD repeater. Speaking of which, taking command of the HUD is a little different. Let me know when you're happy with the MPDs, and yeah, I know it's not rocket science, and are ready to move on to the HUD. Alright, so to take command of the HUD, you have to first press the castle switch down. Down, not aft, mind you. And then short push it forward. If you do this correctly, you'll see the in command queue just above the Mach number on the left side of the HUD. If you don't, you'll notice that you're changing the master mode between air-to-air and air-to-ground, because this is what happens when you just push the castle switch forward without properly pressing it down first. It all seems straightforward, but takes some time getting used to, so go ahead and practice. In the next lesson, we will go a bit deeper into the displays and learn how to program them and set them up for various master modes. Probably thinking, why is this guy wasting my time teaching me to push one button at a time with the sim paused? Well, I'll tell you, because if you don't adopt the crawl, walk, run attitude, you're going to have a difficult time learning how to properly fly this beast. So just trust me on this one, okay? Alright, good job. Welcome to this training mission, in which we will cover programming and scrolling through MPDs and MPCDs. Please wait for everything to load properly. A very handy feature of the Strike Eagle is the ability to program all of the displays, which will allow you to switch through them with a flick of a finger, literally. On top of that, you can set them up specifically for each master mode, but we'll cover that in a different lesson. Let's say we want to have navigation-related data on the left MPD. Go ahead and press push button 11 to access the menu 1 page. To program the displays, you have to box the program legend above push button 6. Press it now. With program boxed, you can choose 3 displays across all 3 menus and set them up in any order you like. Except, since I'm the instructor today, we're going to set them up the way I like. Anyway, to do so, simply press the push buttons next to the displays you want to program. Select HSI as your first screen with push button 3. You see that your selection and its sequence number is now displayed in the middle of the screen. Next, select 2s with push button 13. Third, press ADI with push button 1. On second thought, 2s is not that useful for navigation. Fortunately, it's very easy to deselect any of the screens. Just press their respective push button once again. 13 in this case. Do it now. 2's disappeared from the list. Note that ADI did not move up. You just have a free slot number 2. Let's fill it with Tactical Situation Display. Push button 5. To leave programming mode, simply press push button 6 to unbox the program legend. Good. Now let's move to the right NPD, where we will set up our radars and weapons. Press push button 11 to bring up the menu. Now press push button 6 to enter programming mode. First select air-to-air radar with push button 15. Next select air-to-ground radar with push button 14. Third, I want you to add the air-to-ground delivery page, which is under menu 2. Therefore, you need to press push button 11 first to access it. Now press push button 2 to fill up the list. Good. Deselect program with push button 6. Finally, the MPCD. Let's get that stick out of the way. That's better. Enter the menu by pressing push button 11. Now enable programming with push button 6. Select T-Pod, 2's, and armament pages in any order you like. Good. Deselect program by pressing push button 6. Now let's move on to the last part of this lesson, where we talk about scrolling through programmed displays. You do this by short pressing the castle switch towards the display you want to change. For the left MPD, each actuation of the castle switch left will move you through your program displays in sequence from 1 to 3 and then back to 1. Try it now. For the right MPD, the first actuation will bring up the 2's page. Subsequent ones will scroll through the displays you set up. Note that if there's a pause longer than 5 seconds between presses, the next one will bring up the 2's page again. For the MPCD, the first actuation of the castle switch down will bring up the ADI page. Then things will work just like the right MPD. Very good. That's it for this lesson. Setting up the displays the way you want them in both the front and the back seat, which we'll cover in another lesson, reduces the workload and makes it easier for you to stay in front of the jet when things start getting dicey out there. And let's be honest, it gives you something to do on those long, boring flights where nothing ever happens. Wish they would implement some version of Battleship that you could play with your Wizzo. Maybe they'll add that later along with the sniper pod. We can only hope. Welcome to this short training mission in which you will learn how to assign your multi-purpose displays to one of the 3 master modes: air-to-air, air-to-ground, and nav. Being in the correct master mode is necessary to be able to use some of the jet's functions, but what we're about to learn today is just a handy shortcut to make your office much tidier and your work much more efficient. Let me first prepare everything, then we'll talk about how to set up your displays, and finally, how to use them in practice. In order to program the displays to specific master modes, you first have to program 3 pages for each display, just like we did in the previous lesson. Give me a second to do just that. Once I'm ready, we'll move on.
first the basics. To enable Master Mode programming, you first need to press push button 6 to box the program legend. The numbers reappear next to already selected displays. Now press push button 7 once to select the air-to-air programming mode. Air-to-air legend appeared just below the master mode, and you are now ready to assign one of the 3 pre-selected displays on the left MPD to the air-to-air master mode. This means that each time you select this mode, that one particular page will always show up on the left MPD. Go ahead and choose air-to-air radar with push button 15. Very good. Air-to-air appeared next to the number 2 in the middle of the screen. On to the next mode. Press push button 7 again. Air to ground is now displayed, and this is the master mode we will be programming now. Choose TSD with push button 5. Good. Air to ground is now also visible next to number 3 in the middle of the screen. Finally, time for the nav master mode. Press push button 7 once more. Nav appeared below the master mode legend. Let's assign HSI to it by pressing push button 3. Now exit the programming mode by pressing push button 6. Program will become unboxed. Very good. Now we'll repeat the process for the right MPD. Box the program legend there. Good. Now enable master mode programming by pushing push button 7. Air-to-air master mode appears, but you're free to switch between the modes as you see fit. Press push button 7 again to enable air to ground first. Now select air to ground radar. Press push button 7 to choose nav master mode. Assign tactical situation display to nav. Select air-to-air master mode by pressing push button 7 again. It looks like we deselected master mode programming as we cycled through all 3 modes. Press push button 7 once more. We will assign the armament page to air-to-air on this MPD. We're done with the right display. Deselect the program. Finally, let's move to the MPCD. Again, box the program legend by pressing push button 6. Now enable master mode programming. For the air-to-air, we'll want to assign the 2s. Press push button 7 again to select air to ground. Just like with the basic MPD programming, you're not confined to menu 1. Let's assign air to ground delivery displays from menu 2. Select push button 11 to enter it. Now press push button 2 to program air to ground delivery under air to ground master mode. Press push button 7 to switch to nav master mode. Return to menu 1 by pressing push button 11. This is menu 3. You can easily tell where you are by looking at the legend next to push button 11, which now says M. And if the legend says M, that means you're in menu 3. If it says M2, you're in menu 1. And if it says M3, you're in menu 2. Very intuitive. Really? You think so? Okay, but in fact, actually it is. The legend shows you which menu you will enter upon pushing push button 11, which means you should do it once again to enter menu 1. Let's assign ADI to nav master mode. Press push button 1. Deselect programming with push button 6. Okay, on to the grand finale. time to reap the fruit of all the hard work of pressing those push buttons. Go ahead and select the air-to-ground master mode. And lo and behold, with one push of a button, you have all three displays showing pages which you have programmed. It pays off to spend some time on the ground to set them up, because it saves precious seconds later in the air, when things are happening a lot faster. Choose the Nav Master mode. You now have the HSI on the left display, TSD on the right, and ADI on the MPCD. The icing on the cake is that you're still able to normally scroll through the display contents using short presses of the castle switch left, right, and aft. Try it now. Okay, enough of that. Now select the air-to-air master mode. You're back to the pre-programmed view again. Okay, that more or less covers the general MPD, MPCD knowledge, and concludes this lesson. Alright, welcome to this training mission. Please wait for everything to load correctly. This time, we will look at the radios in the F-15E Strike Eagle and how to use them properly. I assume by now you've read the relevant parts of the manual, so we won't be talking about the capabilities of the radios or their frequency ranges. Now, before we proceed, I also strongly suggest that you map the HOTAS mic forward and the HOTAS mic aft switches. These will be used to transmit and receive on the PRI, left radio in the forward position, and the AUX, right radio in the aft position. Let me know when you have that done. Alright, first thing first, turning on the radios. The status of the radios is displayed next to push button 5 and 6. You should currently see an off indication there. There are several ways to turn on the radios. By using the radio submenu push button 1, by inputting a preset channel, introducing a manual frequency, or, and this is really the easiest one, by simply pushing both channel select knobs. Do this now. With power applied to the radios, you can see asterisks before channel numbers next to the knobs you just pushed. Manual frequencies are now displayed above them next to push buttons 5 and 6. You can use each radio either in the preset channel mode or the manual frequency mode. The asterisk indicates which mode is currently active. To switch between them, you have to use the GREC CM buttons on the UFC. Each press of the button moves the asterisk between manual and preset frequencies. Go ahead and press the left GREC button to switch to manual frequency on the left radio. Good! The asterisk has jumped and now the left radio, which we call PRI, is working in the manual frequency mode. Press the left GREC button again to return to the preset channel mode. Turning the channel selector knob is the easiest way to jump from one channel to another, especially if they're close, as an example going from channel 1 to channel 3. Now use the left knob and switch to channel 5 on UHF to tune to the ATIS station.
0355. Winds 315 at 12.
Good. You can increase and decrease the volume using the smaller volume knob. Go ahead and completely silence the ATIS for the time being. Another handy way of switching between channels is entering the desired number on the scratch pad and then pressing the respective channel selector knob. Let's switch to channel 10 on AUX, so the right radio, press 1 on the UFC. Now press 0. And push the right channel knob. You should now hear distant radio comms for air-to-air refueling operations. Good. There will be moments during the missions when you will be called to switch to a frequency which was not pre-programmed on the ground and requires a manual input. Actually, it will happen quite often knowing Baltic Dragon. All the time, really. To enter a manual frequency, simply type it on the UFC. The decimals are not required. And press push button 5 for the left radio or 6 for the right one. Let's try with the simple 251 for the aux radio. Press 2 on the UFC, followed by 5, and then, you guessed it, 1. And now press push button 6. To be able to transmit and receive on the manual frequency, we should first enable it by pushing the right GREC button. Do it now. Hey, it's Wags. Anyway, let's continue with the lesson. For now, turn down the volume on the aux radio. Now, take a look at the bottom line on the UFC display. You should see the previous frequency sitting right in the middle of that line. This is a very neat feature allowing you to quickly jump back to whatever channel or frequency you had before by simply pressing push button 6 again. Do that now. One more thing we should cover is the guard monitoring frequency. The military air distress frequency is 243.0, and the Strike Eagle is capable of monitoring it in the background irrespective of what channel or frequency it is currently using. In order to enable guard monitoring, you have to first press the shift button on the UFC, and then press the GREC button for the radio you want to monitor guard on. Let's use the left one. Press shift, and left GREC. Letter G should now be shown behind the frequency in the 4th line on the UFC display. This means that the Pry is now monitoring guard. Crank up the volume a little bit, please.
Shotgun flight, acknowledge 9 line.
Can you clarify the target?
Whatever. To disable guard monitoring, follow exactly the same procedure. One last thing we should cover briefly is the dedicated radio menu. They are different for both radios, but for now there's only one important thing you should learn, and that is for the aux. To enter the radio submenu, the scratch pad needs to be clean. Just to be on the safe side, press the clear button twice. Chances are that everything went black on the UFC, so press the menu button once to bring it back. Now press push button 6 to enter the aux radio submenu. You can check what most of the options do or don't do in the manual. Frankly, most of them don't do anything important, but one important feature here is the ability to switch from the alpha mic frequency to the Fox mic frequency. To do this, press the push button 9 where it says Man AM. It should now say Man-FM. We'll now type in the frequency, and remember that for aux in FM mode, you need to use the decimals. Press 3. Now press 1. Decimal. Two. And press push button 6 to introduce the manual FM frequency. Good. Crank up the volume a little bit, please. That sounds good. Alright, that concludes this training lesson. Well done. Welcome to this training mission, in which we will talk about the basics of navigation in the F-15E. As always, please wait for everything to load properly. I pause the sim so that we can go through all the basic concepts. When we finish, I'll unpause and let you fly the jet. First order of business is to set up your displays. Bring up the ADI on your left MPD by pressing push button 11 to enter the menu. And then push button 1. On the right MPD, set up your HSI by pressing push button 11. Followed by push button 3. The tactical situation display is already displayed on the MPCD. Alright, now switch to the Nav Master mode. Let's start with the Tactical Situation Display, or TSD, on the MPCD. As the name implies, it's very useful for showing you your exact position on the moving map and displaying the current flight plan. Your aircraft is marked with a cross, and you will notice that there are different shapes for the steer points, which we will cover in more detail in a separate lesson. The ADI, or the Attitude Director Indicator on the left MPD, is your artificial horizon, which also duplicates some of the data shown on your HUD, like the heading scale and the command bug at the top. The Horizontal Situation Indicator, or HSI, on the right MPD, is the main display used for navigation. It also allows the aircrew to switch between different steering modes, most of which are also coupled with the autopilot, a matter to be discussed in greater detail in other lessons. In this sortie, we will focus on the nav steering mode, which is selected by pressing push button 10. Just above it, you can see the nav data block, which displays your currently selected steer point, bearing and distance to it in nautical miles, as well as time to go marked with an E, or estimated time of arrival marked with A. The currently selected steer point, 1 alpha in this case, is visible on the screen provided that it is within the display range shown between PB16 and 17. Our nav data block tells us that steer point 1A is 57 nautical miles away, so we need to increase the range by pressing PB16. Do it now. Note that only the selected steer point is shown on the HSI, and there's no way to view a full sequence of points here, unlike on the TSD. However, it is possible to simultaneously have both the current steer point and TACAN station displayed on the screen. To turn on the TACAN, have a look at the UFC. Our TACAN is currently set to off, which is indicated by the legend next to menu button 2. Let's tune it to Katasi by typing 44 into the scratch pad. Press 4. And 4 once again. Good, now press menu button 2. The TACAN symbol should have appeared on the HSI about your 1 o'clock. Okay, time to learn how to change the steer points. Unlike many other aircraft, there is no HOTAS button that can switch between them. Instead, you'll have to use the UFC or rely on the auto sequencing mode, which we will cover in a moment. The currently selected steer point is displayed next to menu button 10. In order to change it, simply type the number of the new steer point on the UFC. In this case, press 2. Well done. Now enter it by pushing menu button 10. Steer point number 2 is now visible on the HSI, or rather, would be visible, but the range scale is set too high and it sits on top of the TACAN symbol. Press push button 17 3 times to bring the scale down all the way to 10 nautical miles. Good. Now you should see 2 arrows on the outside of the compass rose. The one with the line in the middle is your TACAN bearing pointer. The other one, sitting on top of the 2 squares, is the nav bearing pointer. The squares are your command heading marker, which in the nav mode is aligned with the steer point, with bearing shown next to the command heading legend. In other steering modes, command heading can be moved around using push buttons 1 and 2, or by using the UFC keyboard to type the desired value. Another important feature is the automatic sequencing option. When boxed, it will cause the steer point to switch to the next one as soon as the aircraft passes over it or crosses the 39 line within 2 nautical miles of it. Let's see how it works in practice. In a moment, I'll unpause the sim. It will fly towards the TACAN station, but without selecting it as our nav source. In other words, keep the nav mode boxed. Ready? Okay, turn towards the TACAN. Disregard steering cues on the HUD and keep the TACAN bearing pointer on the lubber line on the HSI. As sequence point 2 is less than 2 miles away from the station, it should automatically change once you cross its 39 line without having to pass directly overhead. Okay, we have switched to sequence point 3. Now have a look at the TSD. You'll note that it's marked with a square and not with a circle, as was the case with previous points. That's because waypoint 4 is a target point, indicated by a triangle, which makes the waypoint immediately before it an ingress point, denoted by a square. Last thing I want to cover in this introduction is selecting target points as your current steer point. Target points are denoted by a number, followed by a dot, and this is what you have to type on the UFC keyboard. Press 4, followed by a dot, and now push menu button 10. Good. I know I said this would be the last thing, but let's have a quick look at the UFC options before we finish. You're now looking at menu 1, but the most important ones for navigation are data 1 and data 2, accessed using the, you guessed it, data button. Press it once. This is the data 1 menu, which provides you with a lot of interesting information and options. The first one is the distance and bearing to the currently selected sequence point, mirroring the information displayed in the nav block on the HUD and the HSI. Next is your estimated time of arrival, which you can easily change into estimated time en route by pressing menu button 2. Try it now. The third is the option to display true airspeed on the HUD below the indicated airspeed. Turn it on now. You can also choose to show the ground speed instead, which is probably more useful, by pushing menu button 4. Try it now. As you can see, you cannot display both the true airspeed and the ground speed at the same time. You can have either one of the two or none. Moving on, current wind speed and direction is displayed next to menu button 7. Above it, you can see the Zulu time. Moving up is your radar altitude,
Pressing menu button 9 allows you to display it on the HUD. Do it now. Finally, the currently selected steer point, when you press it, you'll enter a sequence point submenu. What are you waiting for? Good. This submenu offers you detailed information about the current and any other sequence points you choose. It also allows you to add new sequence points, change existing ones, and even go deeper and open several other submenus, which we'll cover in a separate lesson. And that's it for today. We really only scratched the surface of all you need to know about navigation in this lesson, but it should be enough to get you going, especially if you have a competent Wizzo in the back seat guiding you along. Welcome to this training mission in which we will talk about the basics of the air-to-air radar in the F-15 Strike Eagle. Please wait for the mission to load properly. I'm not going to waste your time with a technical description for all of the data on the AN/APG-70 radar and its capabilities. You can find all that in the manual. Instead, let's jump directly into the jet and learn the most important aspects of the radar in the air-to-air mode. You can see that the air-to-air radar screen is already displayed on the left MPD. You should also see two contacts, likely denoted by a triangle, at roughly 40 and 25 nautical miles respectively off your nose. You can easily tell the distance to a contact at a glance by referencing the currently selected radar scale, in this case 80 miles, as indicated by the number in the top right corner and the horizontal lines on the display. Each of them equals a quarter of the selected scale. Therefore, for 80 miles, they'll show 20, 40, and 60 miles respectively, going from the bottom to the top. To change the scale, you'll use the TDC controller on your throttle, which allows you to move the target acquisition symbol currently sitting in the middle of the screen. However, to be able to do that, you have to first take command of your radar. Do it now by pressing and holding the castle switch left. Good. You are now in command. To increase or decrease the range, simply move the acquisition symbol to the top or the bottom edge of the screen. Please try it now and let me know when you set the scale to 20 nautical miles. You should now see a small arrow at the very top of the display indicating that one of the contacts detected by the radar is outside the currently selected scale. As you move the acquisition symbol around the screen, there are several moving parts we should have a closer look at. In the top left, the two changing numbers are bearing in range in nautical miles from your aircraft to the location of the acquisition symbol. The two hollow dots along the left side of the screen are called the radar beam altitude coverage circles and show the maximum and minimum altitude that the radar beam is covering with the current settings. The digital readout of these altitudes is constantly shown next to the acquisition symbol. You will notice that the further away you move the acquisition symbol from your jet, the higher the coverage, and vice versa. But while the distance is an important factor here, there are at least two other things that play an even greater role, which are the number of bars and elevation of the antenna. The number of bars can be set to 1, 2, 4, 6, or 8 using push button 2. As you increase this number, you'll notice that the antenna elevation scale, the two hollow dots, get further away from one another, thus allowing for greater vertical coverage. The downside, however, is it takes longer for the radar to complete a full sweep. Antenna elevation can be changed using the wheel on the throttle. Move it up and down and see how the values for minimum and maximum coverage change.
The green elevation caret on the left side of the screen shows the angle at which the antenna is currently pointing. Go ahead and play with the elevation and number of bars for a while. We have talked about the vertical coverage. Now let's have a quick look at how wide the normal beam is. In normal mode, it covers 120 degrees in front of the aircraft, but it's possible to narrow it down to 60 degrees using a method called azimuth bumping. To azimuth bump, simply move the acquisition symbol to the left or the right edge of the screen. You'll notice that the two dots at the bottom of the display are closer and can be moved left and right using the TDC. Note that it only works in SRM and MRM modes. Finally, to return to full 120 degree scan, move the TDC once again to the left or right edge of the screen. Take a moment to play with those options. Alright, now set the full coverage, bars to 4, elevation to 0, and scale to 80. Let me know when you're ready to move on. You should again see two contacts on the screen at roughly 25 and 40 miles. Go ahead and place the acquisition symbol above the one closer to your aircraft. Number 19 should appear next to the contact, indicating its altitude. If you do the same for the one further away, it should show 31 or so. You'll also notice that both contacts become brighter on certain sweeps of the radar and stay dark for others. They will light up only when painted by the beam as it sweeps through a bar corresponding to their altitude. If the bar is too low or too high, they'll remain dark. The number of frames dark contact remain on the screen can be changed using push button 3. Go ahead and see how it works. The last important setting is the pulse repetition frequency, or PRF, which can be set to high, medium, or interleaved by pressing push button 6. In the simplest possible terms, the high PRF is mainly used for seeing hot, nose-on contacts, whereas medium is best for seeing maneuvering targets or targets that are not nose-on. Interleaved constantly alternates between the two. Okay, time to lock one of those targets and enter the single target track, or STT mode. To do so, move the acquisition symbol over the desired contact and short press the TDC. The radar will enter a mini raster mode, and if it scores enough hits on the target, it acquires a lock. Let me know when you've achieved that. Several new symbols should now be visible on the radar screen and on the HUD. Starting with the HUD, you should see the target designation box at the location of the locked target. To the right, you have a range scale with lots of weird symbols you don't have to worry about at this stage, as we'll cover them on some other day. The changing number on the left side of the scale is the closure, or VC rate. The target's altitude and digital range are displayed to the right. Similar information can be found on the radar screen. The target is denoted as a star with a heading vector or a flake symbol if it's trying to jam the radar. Its altitude is displayed at the left edge of the display, and closure rate and range scale are shown along its right edge. Now, to drop the lock, simply depress the automatic acquisition switch. Do it now. good. Okay, the last thing will be a little practice in using the radar settings to find and lock a helicopter that's circling at 5,000 feet over the water, around 15 nautical miles away from us. Set the bars to 4, scale to 20, and PRF to medium, and position the antenna to cover the minimum altitude of 2,000 feet. Can you see the radar signature of the helo? No? And no wonder. The helicopter is a slow-moving target, and as such, it's difficult to pick up by the radar. But don't worry, as the smart people over at Raytheon added the option called GMTR, or Ground Moving Target Rejection, to help us in situations just like this one. What does it do? It allows the aircrew to make the radar more sensitive to slow-moving targets, with the downside of allowing more ground clutter and false targets appearing on the screen. The GMTR setting can be changed by using push button 4. Press it 3 times to set the GMTR to low. If the elevation is set correctly, you should start seeing some returns. If you move the acquisition symbol, you'll see their altitude, some of them at -1, 0, or 1. You should ignore them as ground clutter and continue searching ahead of you for one flying at 4,000 to 5,000 feet. Feel free to decrease the number of bars and closely watch the digital altitude readout. Your goal now is to lock that helo. Let me know when you've done this. Well done. I mean, relatively well done, considering you didn't have to fly the jet because the sim was paused, and you didn't have 1,000 other things you normally would, but still not bad. Thank God during the real sortie you'll have a Wizzo who will be doing this job for you. In this training mission, we will be covering the basics of using the F-15E Strike Eagle's radar capabilities in the air-to-ground mode. As usual, sit back and relax while everything loads properly. The air-to-ground radar is a very powerful tool which you can use for building situational awareness, getting accurate representation of the target area at long distances, marking points of interest, designating targets, updating your INS, and more. Don't expect to learn all of it during this mission. Today we're only covering the basics. The first thing to do is to bring up the air-to-ground radar on one of the MPDs. Please note that it's not possible to use it on the MPCD. Enter the air-to-ground radar page on the left MPD and let me know when you're ready to proceed. Good. Now take command of your radar, long pressing the castle switch left. Okay, the radar is now working, painting the picture of the terrain ahead of you. You can also see the range rings, though this time they're curved, so this is different than our air-to-air radar. First thing I want you to do is to increase the range using push button 14. You should see sequence points from your current flight plan superimposed over the radar screen. You can turn them off using the declutter option available via push button 2. Go ahead and do that now. Good. Now bring them back in again. You can instantly move the cursor between the sequence points using push button 17 or by pulling coolie switch up short. Please use the coolie switch to cycle through all the available sequence points, which means only those that are within the radar field of view. You will notice that doing so slews the cursor to the currently selected sequence point and then, after the last available point, switches it back over to the center of the screen. You can also freely move the cursor around the display using the TDC. As you do this, you'll notice several things happening on the screen. Numbers in the top left corner are azimuth and range to the cursor position. This is different than the air-to-air radar mode, where an actual compass bearing from the nose is shown. The ALT legend below gives you the minimum and maximum altitude covered by the beam with the given antenna position. Elevation can be changed using the wheel and the throttle, and it has a huge impact on what you will see on the screen. ALT is typically only used or needed for detecting weather. As an example, place the cursor over waypoint 3 and raise the antenna. The caret on the elevation scale will start moving up, and as the minimum and maximum coverage altitude increase, you'll start seeing less and less of a map until nothing more is displayed, because the beam is now looking above even the highest terrain features. Now move the antenna all the way down. You'll first see the full radar map, but will soon start shrinking closer and closer to your aircraft as the antenna paints the area nearer to you until it's looking almost directly down. Remember that you can easily check what is the min and max coverage in any part of the screen by moving the cursor there and checking the ALT reading. Okay, time to move to a different ground radar mode. You currently are in RBM, or Real Beam Map mode, as indicated by the legend above push button 6. The RBM provides low resolution ground mapping and weather detection capability. Press the push button to move to the next mode. GMT is the ground moving target mode, which displays moving targets on the radar screen as crosses. Note that it can also be interleaved with the RBM, which we will cover in a different lesson. Press the push button 6. HRM is a high resolution map, and this is where the air-to-ground radar really shines. This mode allows you to build pretty accurate pictures of a small area at large distances and fully deserves a separate lesson. So for the time being, let's move on. Press push button 6. PVU stands for Precision Velocity Update Mode, and it's a very useful function to quickly and accurately update the INS, or the Mission Navigator velocities, which in turn is important for building good quality, high resolution maps. Obviously we couldn't use it now, since the sim's paused and we're not moving, but the process itself is pretty straightforward. Okay, press the push button 6 once more to return to RBM mode, and we'll move on to cover another important topic, which are the different cursor functions. These can be changed using push button 7, and the default one here is map. It is part of the HRM functionality and will be covered elsewhere. Suffice to say, this option allows you to build an HRM patch map of a certain area covering between 80 and less than 1 nautical mile. The size of the patch is chosen using push button 8. Press push button 7 now and we'll move on. Position update cursor function is used when the aircrew needs to perform a position update to either the MN Mission Navigator or the INS from the Real Beam map. Press push button 7 again. Using the target cursor function, the aircrew can designate any point on the Real Beam map or high resolution map for weapons delivery. To do so, simply press the TDC at the location of your choosing. You'll see a triangle with a line extending from it and a designate legend below. We'll cover target designation in detail in another lesson. Press push button 7 once more. The Q cursor function directs or commands a sensor, such as a lantern, to a selected point on the radar display. Press the push button 7 one last time. Finally, the mark cursor function will let the aircrew place mark points on the radar map for future reference. You can have a maximum of 10 mark points, and each new one above 10 will overwrite the first one. Go ahead and place a few by pressing the TDC. A small triangle with the number will appear. You can display a maximum of 5 mark points at a time. Let me know when you're ready to move on. Okay, push button 9 allows the aircrew to choose the desired antenna azimuth scan. In full mode, the radar covers 100 degrees in front of the jet, but this can be changed to half, 50 degrees, or quarter, 25 degrees. Press push button 9 once. You are now in the 50-degree scan, and you should see that the area covered by the radar has changed. You can position the scan on the cursor by moving the cursor to another part of the screen. As soon as it stops moving, The area around it will be scanned by the radar. Alright, I'll unpause the mission and let you digest all the new things we just covered. And don't worry, because most of the time your wizard will be doing all that work while you focus on keeping the jet steady for him. Which reminds me that we should cover the autopilot modes pretty soon. Welcome back. This training mission will serve as a basic introduction to using the PAX, or the Programmable Armament Control Set, in the air-to-air mode. Please wait for everything to load properly. The PAX is your main tool when it comes to setting up and monitoring your weapons. While it obviously shines in the air-to-ground domain, it also has its uses in the air-to-air arena. Alright, without further ado, let's jump straight into it. The air-to-air master mode is set by default, so we can move to the PAX. Press push button 11 on the left NPD to enter the menu page. And now press push button 2 marked ARMT. Don't ask me why it's named ARMT instead of PAX here. I don't know. We are now in the main menu, where you can choose to go to dedicated air-to-air or air-to-ground, training, or jettison pages. We'll skip the load page in this lesson and focus on the main AA PAX display. Press push button 2 to access it. In the center of the screen, you can see the outline of your jet with all the available stations and information on what is loaded on each of them and what is the status of each missile. As you can see for this sortie, we have one type of each missile that the Strike Eagle can carry loaded on the jet. Now, before we move further, one very important thing for air-to-air combat is the weapon select switch position. It can either be in the gun, SMR, short-range missile, or MRM, medium-range missile position. And this setting dictates which weapons are ready to be used and what symbology is shown on the HUD. Go ahead and make sure the MRM is selected. This places medium-range missiles in the launch priority. You should see that the AIM-120 Charlie on Station 7 Charlie is now boxed. Mind you that newer versions of the 120 Charlie will be marked with a V on the display. To switch between the active missiles, short press forward the boat switch on the throttle. As you reject one missile and move to another, have a look at the HUD. The legend in the bottom left window changes, showing you the type and number of available weapons of each kind. Now switch to SRM by moving the weapon mode switch to the center position. Switch in the aft position. This causes the radar to switch into the guns mode and brings up the gun funnel on the HUD. Let me unpause the mission so you can take a few turns to better see it. Okay, enough fun. Now return to the air-to-air packs page and make sure the MRM is selected. Back to work into our packs display. Let's have a quick run through all the push buttons and their functions. Push button 1 allows to switch between the high and low gun firing rate. In the high setting, it'll shoot 6,000 rounds per minute. In the low, it's a lousy 4,000 rounds, only 66 per second. The low would normally be used against a ground target, so stick to the high for the air-to-air combat. Push button 2 and 3 let you select target size and radar cross-section, but I wouldn't worry about it too much in this sim. Push button 4 is the flight member identification and is used for deconfliction with your wingmen. All members of the flight select their respective position. On a solo flight, you'd choose 1-1. If you're number 2 in a 2 ship, you'd select 2-2. And if you're number 2 in a 4 ship, you choose 2-4, and so on. Push button 5 is used for running a built-in test for individual AIM-120 missiles. They all automatically undergo this procedure once power is applied to the jet, but the bid can also be manually initiated for each AMRAAM separately. Okay, the last thing we need to cover here is the training mode. Return to PAC's main menu by pressing push button 11. As you can see, the training modes are visible next to the push buttons 14 and 15. By boxing one of them, or both, you enable the respective training mode. That means that you can stay in combat mode for air-to-ground, but training for air-to-air, for instance. Go ahead and box the air-to-air training. Now return to the air-to-air packs page. You see on the right side of the display that you're currently in the air-to-air training and air-to-ground combat modes. The AA training legend is boxed. What does it mean in practice? That you get all the symbology and indications normally, but you're not able to physically expend any weapons. To exit the training mode, simply unbox the legend in the main PAC's menu. Okay, feel free to play with the settings. There are a few drones ahead of you that you can shoot down if you wish, but I won't give you the instructions on how to do that in this lesson. Check the manual or use the good old trial and error. Or, I wonder what this button does. That's a good learning method. You're in the sim after all. Enjoy! Oh yeah, don't forget to disable the training mode.
Welcome back. This training mission serves as a basic introduction to using the PAX, or Programmable Armament Control Set, in the air-to-ground mode. Please wait for everything to load properly. As you probably remember from the air-to-air introductory mission, PAX is your main tool when it comes to setting up and monitoring your weapons, and will be extensively used when planning and performing air-to-ground missions. First, let's enable the air-to-ground master mode. Note that it's not necessary for setting up or manipulating the PAX, but since this session is all about air-to-ground, let's make it a good habit. Good. Now enter the PAX, or ARMT armament page, on the left MPD. Press push button 11, followed by push button 2. We're now in the PAX main menu, where you can set up the air-to-ground weapons, edit the air-to-ground loadout, set up combat jettison, or enable training mode. We'll leave the jettison and load parts for another time and focus on the air-to-ground page, as it already is going to be a long lesson. Press push button 3 labeled AG. Okay, this is the air-to-ground display, and you, or your Wizzo, will be spending a lot of time on this page and its subpages in the future. Let's go through the main options. Push button 1 works in the same way as in the air-to-air mode and lets you switch between the high and low rate of fire for the gun. As a rule of thumb, high will be used for aerial engagements, while low should be set for strafing runs. Push button 2 lets you quickly jump in the air-to-air page, but we don't need to go there now. Push button 5, labeled Prog, allows you to switch between 4 different programs that can be set up for various stations. These stations are listed in the top row of the display from left to right. Station 2 under the left wing, left conformal tank, centerline Station 5, right conformal tank, and Station 8 under the right wing. You can see at a glance the kind and the quantity of available weapons on each station. If nothing's loaded, pylon will be displayed, as in the case with Station 5. If the pylon is removed, then the legend will be blank. Loft, TARM, AT, and CT are parts of weapon delivery data set up in the air-to-ground delivery page, which we will visit at the end of this training. Finally, the current mode for air-to-air as well as air-to-ground, which can be either training or combat, is displayed next to push button 15. That covers the basics, so let's jump into setting up the programs. It's important to remember that these are linked to specific types of weapons. You can select all stations with the same type of bomb and set one program for all of them. Then you can switch to the next program, select only one of the stations, and set it up differently, and so on. We'll prepare 3 different programs now, starting with the 2,000-pound Mark 84s. Select Station 2 and 8 by pressing push buttons 20 and 16. Okay, both stations are now boxed, and your next step should be to select the desired delivery mode. In this case, either CDIP or Auto. The CDIP is exactly the same as CSIP for all the other aircraft, and stands for Continuously Displayed Impact Point. The other option is Auto, and it allows you to drop the bombs on the previously designated target. Select Auto by pressing push button 7. Now we have to choose the release sequence for each pickle press. One stay means that one weapon for each selected station will be dropped with every press of the pickle button. Selecting step will drop one weapon with each press, alternating between all the selected stations. Choose the first option. Finally, the fusing. The selection here will matter mostly for retarded bombs and laser-guided bombs. Anyway, for now, choose the NT, or nose tail, to arm all 3 arming wire units. We're set. You should see the auto delivery reticle on your HUD now, which means that the program is ready to be used. Let's quickly make another one. Press push button 5 to cycle to program 2. Now select left conformal tank by pressing push button 19. We have our snake eye bombs loaded there. These are best used when flying low and fast and in the C-dip mode, so press push button 6 to select it. Let's set them up so we expend all 6 bombs at a time. To do so, you can choose one of the 2 remaining options. Ripple Single allows to drop a string of bombs for as long as the pickle button is pressed, alternating between all selected stations. Ripple Multiple works in a similar way but drops bombs simultaneously from all the selected stations, so in pairs, threes, etc. Since we have Snake Eyes loaded only on one station, choose Ripple Single by pressing push button 8. New options appear on both sides of the screen. On the left you can select the quantity or the total number of bombs to be released. On the right side is the interval between the bombs in feet. Set the quantity to 6 pressing push button 3 5 times. Now set the interval to 110 feet by pressing push button 13 once, followed by push button 12. Good, now the fusing. For Snake Eyes, it does make a big difference. Choosing nose only will make them drop as normal bombs. However, if you select nose tail or tail only, it will make them deploy speed retarding fins. Do so now. Okay, now cycle the program a few times using push button 5. You'll notice that when you select program 1, it shows the selected stations, auto reticle on the HUD, and all the delivery options in the bottom line. When you move to program 2, the HUD shows the CDIP Pipper and the station with Snake Eyes is boxed. You can set up a maximum of 4 delivery programs in that way. Good, now make sure you have program 2 selected and press push button 10 marked AG Delivery. You should now see additional information such as altitude, wind speed, and current time. Delivery data for the selected program is also shown. The 3 columns at the center of the display is the sensors data, including their readiness and priority. You can set the priority to manual or auto mode. We won't be going deeper into this topic today, just make sure that the legend in the first column and next to push button 13 says auto. The RET and MRA legend are for reticle depression and minimum recovery altitude. Both can be set using the UFC. Let's have a look at one last subpage, as I know this is a lot to digest already. Press push button 1 to enter the programming page. The push buttons from 15 to 20 can be used to set the manual sensor hierarchy, but we won't be doing that today. Loft allows the aircrew to program the desired angle for loft delivery using the scratch pad. Push button 3 and 4 are used to set the long track and cross track. These are described in the manual and I recommend you check the details there. TARM over push button 6 allows entry of time before weapons arm after release in seconds. Finally, push button 8 allows to enter the time for auto lays when using LGBs. We'll cover that in another lesson. Okay, that's enough for today. I'll unpause the mission in a moment. You have a bunch of trucks at target point 3. Go ahead and put both programs we set up to good use. Oh yeah, don't forget to set your master arm to on. Have fun! time to learn how to put this baby down in one piece. There will be lots of moving parts in this mission and much less time to ponder them. Therefore, it's a good thing that we're starting in a simulator. I have paused this lesson in order to go through all the steps while you are not actually flying the jet. Once I'm confident you know what should be done and in what order, I will unpause and let you try to land. I have changed the position of some of the switches so that you're actually going to have to flip them as part of the descent checklist. You know, it's good to start that muscle memory process early. You may be wondering about setting up the displays for landing, and there is no rule. It all comes down to personal preferences, but it's a good idea to have the ADI and the HSI up. Also, you might want to set up the TACAN to monitor and back up the approach. Okay, first thing is the descent check, done in both cockpits. In the front seat, you'll need to check the following knobs and switches. Set the master arm switch to safe. Check the altimeter setting. In this case, we have a standard 2992, so all is good. Check that the terrain following radar power switch is set to the standby or off position. Set the pitot heat and the engine heat switches as required. Again, we don't need them during this approach, so make sure they're set to off. And finally, the external lights. Position lights to desired brightness, let's say 4. Anti-collision lights on. In the back, your Wizzo would make sure that the CMD knob and the targeting pod switch are both in standby. Alright, descent checklist complete. In a moment, I'll unpause the lesson, but before I do, let me quickly guide you through all the steps. You will descend to 1,600 feet AGL and keep 300 knots indicated, flying directly over the runway. Once you pass the middle of the runway, turn left, reducing throttle to idle. Do not descend during the turn. Stay at 1,600 feet AGL. Your goal now is to roll out on the reciprocal heading to the runway and putting it somewhere between the missile rail on the wing and the wingtip once you complete the 180-degree turn. As your airspeed drops to 250 knots indicated, lower your landing gear and flaps. Once you are flying parallel to the runway at the reciprocal heading on the downwind leg, you will perform the landing checklist. This will consist of checking that the landing gear is down and locked, checking that your flaps are down, checking that the hydraulic gauges are in the green, checking that your landing light is on, checking that the anti-skid is in the normal position, checking that the parking brake is set to off. After you finish all of this, it will be about time for the base turn to final. Wait for the runway to be 45 degrees behind your left wing and your speed to drop below 200 knots indicated. You will push the nose down between 5 and 10 degrees and hold the AOA between 20 and 25 while turning to final. When you roll out on final, the goal is to keep the AOA between 20 and 22 all the way to the flare. Except with such AOA, there really is no flare. Just pull power and add speed brake as you cross the underrun. You have it all listed in your knee board if you want to go through it once again. Let me know when you're ready to unpause the sim. Okay, descend to 1,600 feet AGL and keep 300 knots. Align yourself with the runway, magnetic heading of 119. You're a little low. Okay, get ready for that left-hand turn. 3, 2, 1, now. Throttle idle. Keep the altitude. You want to have the wingtip on the runway after you roll out. Gear and flaps down. Wings level at a heading of 299. If you've done it correctly, your left wingtip should be touching the runway. Before landing checklist, landing gear down, flaps down, hydraulic pressure green, landing light on, anti-skid normal, parking brake off. Commence the base turn, nose 5 to 10 degrees down, AOA between 20 and 25. Switch your scan between AOA and the runway. Try to roll out on the center line.
Low altitude, low altitude.
Okay, on final, now keep the AOA at 20 to 22 degrees. Extend your speed brake and pull power, keep the AOA, do not flare too much. You've touched down. Keep the nose at 12 degrees for best aerodynamic braking. Once all 3 wheels are on the ground, engage the wheel brakes. Okay, close the speed brake. Ouch, that didn't go too well. Thank God and the mod for the simulators. Try again.
Como pudieron ver, estas fueron las misiones de entrenamiento básico que explican de excelente forma, muy al grano, como lo haría yo. Se nota de inmediato que este es un jet con una gran profundidad para dominarlo y eso da oportunidades para generar más tutoriales. Por ejemplo, ya tengo en mente configuraciones de pantalla para perfiles de misiones en particular, etc. También para los que aún no lo tienen, espero que esta demostración les haya servido para decidirse si comprarlo o no. Con eso doy por terminado el video. Agradecería el apoyo si te conviertes en miembro. Como motivación, iré subiendo los videos del F-15E un día antes para miembros del canal y luego para el resto. También tengo enlaces en la descripción que quizás te interesen. Nos vemos en el siguiente video.